Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have someone I consider a friend and someone who I believe is one of the most outstanding attorneys, litigators in our country. And frankly, if I had my way, she would be the next Supreme Court nominee. She is that brilliant and that courageous. She is not afraid to take a stand for freedom, because that's her track record. Let me give you a little background on Sidney Powell. She served in the Department of Justice for 10 years in Texas and Virginia and has devoted her private practice to federal appeals for the past 20 years. She was the youngest assistant attorney, U.S. attorney in the country when she was appointed, I believe, maybe about 15 years old, Sidney. Because
No doubt.
Later, she became chief of the appellate section for the Western and Northern Districts of Texas. In addition to practicing law, she now serves as fellow of the London Center for Policy Research and a senior policy advisor for America First. She is past president of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers and of the Bar Association of the Fifth Federal Circuit, recognized by her peers as a super lawyer and named as one of the best lawyers in America for years. She has been the lead counsel for more than 500 appeals in the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, resulting in more than 180 published opinions. Sidney writes on current legal events and government corruption for the New York Observer, the Daily Caller, The Hill, is a regular on Fox News. My favorite guest, Lou Dobbs, has on Fox Business News, and Lou Dobbs is my favorite by far on Fox. My favorite guest, I also think his favorite guest, is Sidney Powell. She also appears frequently on Hannity, Shannon Bream, Fox and Friends, Newsmax TV, One America News, and many radio stations and shows. I have been fortunate to have Sidney as a guest. In addition to all of this, she is truly a Renaissance woman. She is a phenomenal author. License to Lie is her latest. License to Lie, licensetolie.com. You can also go to sidneypowell.com. Sidney, welcome to the Insider Insight Show.
Oh, thank you so much, Dave. It's an honor to be with you, and what an introduction. I don't think I can live up to that.
Well, you've already lived it, Sidney. Now, Sidney, recently this was written about your book, and frankly, it's not only a description of your book, it's your book has already laid bare this entire Mueller investigation goat rodeo. Here's what they said about your book. License to Lie, your book, reveals the strong-arm, illegal, and unethical tactics used by headline-grabbing federal prosecutors in their narcissistic pursuit of power to the highest halls of the government.
That's it.
And, it's interesting, Sidney. Here you are, one of the leading attorneys in the country, and you've pointed out about the issues, the problems, the disparities in the legal system, in the judicial system. And in fact, your book, really, License to Lie, its main character was Robert Mueller's right-hand guy.
Yep, Andrew Weissman, and I wrote it in 2014, published it in 2014.
So, Sidney, one of the questions that has come up from our listeners after you're on our radio show is, so, Sidney Powell, like the central character in her book is this Andrew Weissman, who was Robert Mueller. Did she see this coming like 3 years before it actually started?
Yes, I did.
So how did you pick that up, Sidney?
Because what they were doing was so wrong, and Mueller has been protecting and promoting Weissman over 2 decades. Mueller had a hand in picking him for the Enron task force. Then Mueller, after he ran roughshod over everybody's rights in Houston and destroyed Arthur Anderson and sent 4 innocent Merrill Lynch people to prison, Mueller had a hand in promoting him to become general counsel and deputy director of the FBI. And Bill Hodes, one of the leading legal ethics experts, and I filed grievances against Mr. Weissman with the New York Bar.
Well, you phased out a little bit. Right when you got to New York Bar, Andrew Weissman's folks came in and shut you down. So you filed grievances with the New York Bar. I bet you that went over well.
Yeah, we filed grievances with the New York Bar against Mr. Weissman while he was deputy director, general counsel of the FBI. The Department of Justice came in to defend him on that, the civil division, because he was a government employee. And then without telling us, the New York Bar sent it to the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility to decide the grievance. Well, guess how the Department of Justice decided the grievance being defended by the Department of Justice? They decided, of course, that Mr. Walton had done something wrong, never mind that the Court of Appeals for the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, the second most powerful court in the country probably, had found that he plainly suppressed evidence favorable to the defense, which is a flagrant violation of the government's responsibility under Ethical Rule 3.8. No problem for Mr. Weissman, of course. He did it right and left in all the Enron cases. Nobody got a fair trial. But he went on to NYU Law School then. And then, of course, Leslie Caldwell, when she came back to Department of Justice as Eric Holder's head of the criminal division, right before he left, brought Andrew Weissman back to head the fraud section. And then the next thing we know, Andrew Weissman is secretly running the back channel with Bruce Orr and Christopher Steele on the Steele dossier to the FBI and the DOJ, and then winds up on Mueller's task force against the president. What a coincidence.
So, Sidney...
Corrupt to the core, Dave. Corrupt to the core.
So is this guy, do you believe, is this guy ever going to get what he deserves? Or is he just going to keep slithering through the swamp and just keep harassing, denigrating anyone that pushes against the globalist syndicate? Because he's a globalist is what he is. He's a globalist puppet.
He's a globalist, elitist, snob, and corrupt to the core. The ends justify the means for Mr. Weissman, whatever it is. Threatened witnesses. Evidence has been unsealed recently in Houston from cases 20 years ago that he managed to get sealed that show he literally threatened to indict people if they so much as spoke to a defendant. Threatened to increase charges against them, threatened to increase their sentences, all kinds of... So, hopefully, Mr. Barr, now in charge of the Department of Justice, I'm sure there is more what's called Brady evidence or evidence favorable to the defense that's been hidden against all, that would have been favorable to all the defendants in the Mueller squad prosecutions. I'm hoping some of that, if not all of it, will come to light. There really needs to be a formal review of all of those cases for exculpatory evidence.
Sidney, you are, as I mentioned, one of the most courageous litigators in the country, if not the most courageous. Have you ever gotten blowback from Weissman or any of his little goons?
Other than having my health insurance canceled repeatedly, it seems to happen periodically. It was a real problem early on when the book first came out. 3 weeks after the book came out, I got my first ever any kind of IRS audit. It turned out to be very minor, no big deal. And the bigger deal was having my health insurance canceled. That's been a consistent problem.
I know the IRS audit deal. I got hit with that in 2013 when I was pushing against Obamacare. Where's Weissman going now? Now there was this big ceremonial.
He's back to NYU.
Oh, how perfect.
Yeah, very handy. And he's going to teach, and he's going to help avoid wrongful convictions. I said, well, good. His first step there is leaving the Department of Justice. That's a big step toward avoiding any future wrongful convictions.
Sidney, early on, you had identified the Mueller report as not only being biased, but that it was a witch hunt.
Yes.
You were denigrated. You were beyond criticized. You were ridiculed. You were they tried to humiliate you.
Oh, I didn't even pay any attention to it.
Which is the best way. But my point is that of all those that were so wrong about their assessment of your assessment of the situation as it relates to Russia, collusion, really treason is what they were talking about, and Citizen Trump, President-elect Trump, President Trump. How many of those individuals have apologized to you?
Oh, absolutely none.
Right.
I mean, I made the website Creeps on a Mission, and I have a T-shirt to go with it.
So you have that T-shirt you were mentioning, right?
Yes, I created a T-shirt called Creeps on a Mission that's Comey, McCabe, Stroke, or Weissman, and Bruce Orr behind a battered seal of the Department of Just Us with the eagle covering his face.
Where do people get that? Where can they buy?
Creepsonamission.com.
Creepsonamission.com.
Yeah, and
That's awesome.
They're made in USA, 100% ring spun cotton, and I would encourage everyone to get it and wear it proudly in support of the president as we deal with the fallout from the smear job that I know is in the Mueller report.
So when we're recording this, the Mueller report has not been released by AG Barr. He has come up with a summary statement, a 4-page summary statement. Your take on that 4-page summary statement?
Oh, I'm sure it's perfectly accurate. Bill Barr is a man of great integrity. And, of course, it was written with Mr. Rosenstein and Mr. Mueller. Now, I'm equally certain that in the rest of the 400 pages of the report, as I've predicted for months, is a collection of information pieced together by Mr. Weissman in a narrative that he wanted to create to smear the president on the obstruction of justice issues. That's not going to bear any resemblance to the truth if it's actually put in the correct order and context.
So, Sidney, I'm a little old country doctor, and I read A.G. Barr's report. And here's my take, and then you can tell me where the little country doctor's wrong. In the first part, he says there was no collusion, if you will. There was no treasonous activity between Citizen Trump, President-elect Trump, President Trump, his team, and the Russians.
Right.
They talk about collusion.
No collusion.
Right,
Not
right.
only no collusion, but they tried to dangle stuff in front of them and they rejected it.
So there was, at least my interpretation, there was no crime.
Right.
Which gets me to obstruction. Here's where the little old country doctor has a problem. If there's no crime, how can you have obstruction of justice?
Well, it's very difficult.
I mean, the only way I can see is they're saying, well, there was no crime, but you thought about a way to defend yourself if there was a crime, and that's how you were obstructing justice. So in my way of thinking, the only way they can try to talk about obstruction of justice is that it was a thought crime. Am I wrong?
Well, not necessarily. We don't know exactly what crime they have defined as being the crime that would have been the subject of obstruction.
Got it.
We don't know that it's the crime of that the president might have been considered of with respect to collusion. It could have been another crime. We don't know the answer to that yet.
So now, when we're recording this, A.G. Barr has said later in April he's going to release a redacted version of the report. A portion of the report where the grand jury sensitive information is withheld. Now, it's my understanding the law says when A.G. Barr got that report, he didn't even have to issue a letter.
Right. He was very conscientious. He jumped on it immediately and worked all the weekend to get that letter out because he knew of everybody's interest in it.
But yet,
said in the letter it was just a summary, and he would get it all out as soon as he could.
Yet the globalists are screaming that he not only has to release an unredacted version of the report, but also with all the other substantiating information behind it. To me, that's illegal, Sidney. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. It would be illegal. They are full of shit.
No, so Sidney, if you are sitting in A.G. Barr's seat as Attorney General, which actually I think you should be in the Supreme Court, but AG would be okay, I guess. I guess a preliminary step for you. What would be your next move?
I would simply continue redacting whatever needed to be redacted and give them the report as soon as I could and let them rail however they want to rail.
Michael Horowitz, the Department of Justice Inspector General, already produced information which is actually quite deleterious both to the Department of Justice and to the FBI, not that the bought-off lamestream fake media reported it. In his assessment of the Hillary Clinton email situation, he's now going to be coming forward as it relates to a report on the FISA abuse.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a doozy.
Well, many people... Wait, Sidney, this is important because it's important for people to hear you talk about this. Many people have said, oh, Horowitz is part of the deep state. He's not going to present any information that's troublesome for the deep state. I completely disagree with that. What's your take?
He is not as strong as I would like him to be, but I don't think he's part of the deep state. There were horrible things exposed in his last report. You simply had to read the facts as opposed to the conclusions. I mean, it was chock nails that hidden that the FBI didn't follow up on. So, yes, this report's going to be even more damning. We also know that there were people in the FBI and DOJ at the time that would have been tamping down what would have been released in that report, and hopefully this time there will be less of that. We also know that there are classified sections of whatever Mr. Horowitz does that we never see. So this one's going to be even bigger and more powerful than the last one, because the FISA abuses go back to 2015 when Mr. Comey gave Nellie Orr.
So we blacked out again. Good old Weissman's coming in pretty strong now. We've had a couple blackouts. So you said when Comey presented illegal...
Comey gave according to the decision of Rosemary Collier, the chief judge of the FISA court that came out, it was unredacted in 2017, I think. As far back as 2015, FBI Director Comey gave illegal access to the NSA database, unsupervised, to 3 private contractors. I am as sure as I'm sitting here that one of those was Fusion for political opposition research, and God only knows what else, whatever they wanted, I'm sure, for their private gain, for their company, and for the Clintons and anybody else they wanted to sell it to. And that is just a horrific Fourth Amendment violation. It probably was handed all to Mueller as well, and all kinds of ramifications follow from that. And the FISA court's already said it was egregious Fourth Amendment violations.
Sidney, I have stated that I believe some big heads are going to roll down the line here. And as I said, after I've potentially put a timing on this of the Inspector General's report coming in. President Trump, September 17, 2018, has said that he wants to declassify certain documents, the FISA court applications as it relates to Carter Page, the text emails between McCabe and Strzok and Page, and then the Bruce Orr 302 forms that the FBI fills out when they interview somebody. Many people have said the declassification is never going to occur.
No, I think it will.
I do too.
It's going to have to in one respect. A lot of that information is Brady material as to General Flynn that's never been produced, and probably also as to Paul Manafort that should have been produced. And with respect to whether it's classified or not, it's still Brady information that's owed those two men in their defense. I feel very strongly that General Flynn should be exonerated. I'm sure they're hiding information that would be material to his defense.
And Sidney, his sentencing has been postponed 3-4 times now.
Yes.
You are a litigator of the highest order. How atypical is that for a sentencing to be, delayed now a year and a half?
Well, when somebody's cooperating, it's actually very typical. And I was actually at the first hearing before Judge Sullivan for General Flynn. His first judge, Contreras, suddenly recused. And then he appeared before Judge Sullivan last summer, and then there was a hearing that we thought was going to be the sentencing hearing, expecting to know, because Judge Sullivan's the judicial hero of my book, License to Lie. Mm-hmm. And a whole different person took the bench that day. I don't know what was wrong, but he had the facts completely bass-ackwards and everything else. So hopefully he'll get his situation straightened out, and we'll have Judge Sullivan on the bench the next time he shows up. Yeah,
he took a break in the court, and then he kind of came back and then apologized for the
it was kind of a half-hearted apology, but he was slinging around the word treason as if General Flynn had done something wrong, was working for a foreign power while he was in the White House, and nothing could have been further from the truth. He had the facts completely wrong. And in a high-profile false statement case, that's really bad.
Now, is that the work of your buddy Weissman again?
I don't know.
Because it sure had his fingerprints on it from this guy's perspective, based on his track record.
Yeah. The whole case had Weissman's fingerprints on it. The targeting of General Flynn to begin with had Weissman's fingerprints on it.
So, Sidney, I'm based here in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, right outside that window. I get in a lot of trouble because I have said that one of the people that I believe is going to be prosecuted the soonest in this whole process is actually John Brennan, former director of the CIA. People out that window are really upset with me about that. What's your take? What's your take on Brennan, and what's your take on the assessment that he will be prosecuted, because many people believe that's pure hopium?
Oh, he should be prosecuted. I mean, the evidence right now is that he made serious false statements to Congress. He has been behind this targeting operation from the beginning, creating the entire creeps on a mission false narrative, and the intelligence report to begin with, tasking Peter Strzok with that started the whole thing going. I mean, I've said from the first time I heard about it, it was run like a counterintelligence operation to take down a foreign national government or something. That's Brennan writ large.
Sidney, do you believe that Brennan, Clapper, I'm just saying a few, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, Obama, Hillary Clinton will ever be brought to justice?
I think they have to be for the rule of law to survive in this country, for the people to ever have any faith in the Department of Justice or the FBI ever again.
Many people believe President Trump talked a good game, but he's going to back off and he's not going to push for that. What do you believe?
Well, it really depends on the Attorney General. It depends on Bill Barr's integrity and professionalism and the strength of his spine.
But if those prosecutions don't occur, then it's all been smoke and mirrors.
Right.
Let's turn to the border. Sidney, you took you came on the radio show, my Operation Freedom show, and you spoke about implementing Title 8, Section 1182, small f, which would close the border.
Yes. Well, actually, it doesn't have to close the border. The president has the power to stop all immigration.
Period.
To stop issuing, allowing any immigrants to enter the country, with whatever exceptions he wants to create, and he can still allow non-immigrant visas. So he could still allow student visas, he could still allow tourist visas, he could still allow all kinds of visas that qualify as non-immigrant visas to allow people to come in, but just not allow any further immigration until we catch up on everything that we need to catch up on, including getting out all the illegals that are here, which is like 30 million people.
And this border crisis, this national emergency, gets worse by the day.
It does. It's absolutely appalling. And the bill he just signed that got crammed down his throat by the rhinos and the appalling leadership of both houses of Congress contains provisions that make it even worse. The provision, I think it's Section 221, effectively encourages human trafficking because anyone who steps across the border with a child cannot be deported. It's absolutely appalling. I don't think people realize how bad it is. I think somebody lied to the president about it. Okay. I think people close to the president lied to him about what was in the bill.
I agree.
I think they lied to him about the effect of it. Mm-hmm. I think they lied to him about his options in the emergency declaration, or at least didn't fully explain it to him. I don't think he's getting good advice close around him at all. And some of the people around him in his closest circle are not MAGA people. He needs to get rid of them, clean house, and bring in the people who support his agenda that he was voted in to elect. I mean, that he was elected to put into place, because we're going downhill fast. And the human suffering is just escalating. The country simply can't take it anymore. I have a long Twitter thread that went viral the other day at Sidney Powell, the #1. People are fed up with this.
And rightfully so, because it's the sovereignty of our country and the safety, security of every American on the line.
Exactly. Too many people have died already at the hands of people that aren't supposed to be here, and we can't afford it. We have an rapidly escalating $23 trillion debt. We cannot take care of the entire world. And every dime we send to these pockets with not going to the people that need the money at all. And this business of taxpayers funding nonprofit organizations is horse feathers. Nonprofits should be funded by private contributions that are tax deductible, but not by taxpayer dollars. Now we have the government in the business of taking our tax dollars, skimming off 30% for government inefficiency to decide who gets our tax dollars, and then giving it to these non-government organizations, they call them NGOs, that have all kinds of different problems themselves, skimming here and there, and not getting it where it needs to be at all.
You know, Sidney, when I pointed out the problem with 221, and I pointed out the problem with that many people around him are not giving him good advice, I was told that I was being a poor representative, or a poor supporter of the president.
Oh no, man! I love this president.
Right, and I do too. See, and that's the problem. We started talking about 221, and there'd be a problem, and now there was a report I just saw on Fox actually, where they showed all these men coming across the border with these little kids, and it's exactly what we pointed to weeks ago, Sidney, about 221.
Right. Yeah. Congress just relicensed an escalation in human trafficking and jammed it down the president's throat to sign it. And whoever in that White House is responsible for him signing it needs to go. And
the national emergency, no pun intended, well, it's pun intended, does not trump that signed bill. You've pointed that out.
Exactly. The national emergency does not alleviate the problems put in the law by that bill.
And the one way we could cut this thing right off at the knees is instituting Title 8, Section 1182, subclassification small f.
Right. That just says no more immigration, period. He can stop it as long as he wants to. The authority for that has been affirmed in Trump versus Hawaii. He can issue a blanket order. He can still allow non-immigrant visas for whatever purposes he wants. He could make emergency exceptions to it as needed, but he can stop it all. Other presidents have done it. It's a proven work.
Sidney, I now want to turn briefly to what happened in Chicago. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and then lived in the city of Chicago for years, South Side. Jesse Smollett. Sidney,
that's called the fix, Dave.
What?
That's called fix.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to Chicago politics. I mean, I grew up in it, okay? Sidney, this stinks beyond even Chicago politics.
Yeah, it was a fix by the Obamas on behalf of Jesse Smollett.
So do you believe, Obamas have been critical. Their big organization is called Organizing for Action, right? This community organizing group.
Yeah, OFA, run by Valerie Jarrett and Barack out of their basement of their Kalorama mansion.
Yeah, and when you look at their business model, this whole thing about staging a false event to cause strife and chaos and racial unrest, it makes you wonder.
I don't think there's much to wonder about, Dave. I think it's pretty much right.
Well,
there.
And what about let's talk about the state's attorney, this Kim Foxx. There's a lot. I mean, we had Michelle Obama's chief of staff, Chen, calling her, networking this, and then and the word I hear from my buddies in the Chicago Police Department, they're livid about this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and Sidney, if there's one group of people I would never want to get mad, it's folks in the Chicago Police Department.
Right.
No. But I'll tell you, one of the things that happened is, they tried to seal the records, but the Chicago Police Department actually released them about 10 minutes before the seal time came in.
I heard that.
Do you think it'll ever be tied back to the Obamas, or is this going to get shoved under the rug?
Oh, that's a hard one. Hopefully the FBI will get in there and do the right thing.
So interesting. There's a guy by the name of Greg Wing who's been involved from the FBI in this case. Greg Wing is in charge of in the Chicago field office, in charge of human trafficking and the pedophile issue.
Wow.
And what's interesting, what I understand from my sources in Chicago, is that he was involved in this right immediately after Smollett had filed the police report initially.
The bogus police report to
yeah.
begin with.
Wing was initially involved in this, which to me, there's something else going on there that nobody's talking about. Why would the FBI immediately get involved in this, what appeared to be hate crime, but the guy who got involved from the FBI field office is the guy in charge of human trafficking. There's something else going on here.
Maybe. I mean, we know there's a mail fraud possibility from Smollett's earlier mailings, likely to himself, with threats in it. So I don't know.
So he got off on the state charges, but he hasn't gotten off on the federal charges yet, correct? So there still could be retribution.
Yes. He could still be held accountable for the mail fraud if there's evidence he mailed those threats to himself.
The last issue I want to speak to you about, Sidney, you've been very generous with your time, thank you, is the what I call college gate. Right?
Oh, yeah. That's another doozy.
It is another doozy, and it really opens up the entire narrative of pay to play, what pay to play is all about. The pay to play business model of the globalists, it's really ubiquitous throughout a lot of their criminal activities, whether it's the college gate, paying for somebody to proctor your kid's test, change your kid's test so they move up 400 points on their SAT, get into a college that they have no academic record that would enable them to get into college, or whether it's Uranium One.
Yeah.
It's a pay-to-play mechanism that really is part of the globalist business model. And the question I have, Sidney, is how do you think this college gate thing is going to play out? And do you think people are going to be able to associate what happens with college gate, which ultimately is shown with Uranium One and the Clinton Foundation?
Oh, I hope so. I mean, I hope it exposes absolutely all of it for the corrupt cesspool that it is. Because until we restore honesty to everything at a fundamental level and have people earn what they achieve, we're lost.
Folks, I encourage you to go to two websites, Sidney Powell, Sidney Powell, Powell.com, and licensetolie.com. They can get the shirts. Everybody has to have a shirt. Where do they get that at?
Creepsonamission.com.
Creepsonamission.com. Sidney, what do you think? Final question. What do you think is going to be the next shoe to drop as it relates to, if you will, the Trump counteroffensive? Drop.
The unredacted Mueller report, I would expect to be the next shoe to drop in the continuing saga of the creeps on a mission to destroy the president.
And now I think there's always already an indication that they're starting to move away from even the unredacted portion of the Mueller report, because now they're screaming for his tax returns and quoting some statute, Title 26, Section 6103, subsection F, where the head of the oversight committee can ask for his tax returns.
Yeah, I think they can ask till the cows come home, but I wouldn't expect them to get it.
Well, I did a little research on that, and I was reading it, and I got to, that was subsection F. Here's what subsection G, Sidney, is where the president can ask. Subsection G is where the president can ask for any Americans
tax return.
Yeah. So if I were Trump, I'd say, guess what? You got F, I got G.
Right. And I'm getting every member of Congress.
That's what, I'm a bad guy. That's what I do. And you are an inspiration to all of us, Sidney, who watch you, not just on Fox, not just read your books, but really watch everything that you do to uphold the freedoms and liberties of our country. And I'd really like to thank you on behalf of millions of Americans.
No, thank you so much, Dave. I feel the same way about you. It takes all of us. We all have to fight for our freedoms.
Agreed. And until next time, this is Dave Janda signing off. As we always sign off, thanks for your time, and dream big and dare to fail. Well, thanks so much.